The U.S. government today hit the $14.3 trillion debt ceiling, according to the Treasury Department. Our next guest has vigorously opposed any effort to raise that debt ceiling unless a balanced budget amendment is passed. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Senator Mike Lee. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Lou.
Senator, we are here. The catastrophe that Timothy Geithner had predicted, the rhetoric that flowed from this administration for weeks, indeed months, has now been proved to be, well, at the best, hyperbolic, at the worst, fear-mongering. What is the situation as you see it?
Well, the lights are still on. We're still here. We haven't disappeared into thin air. That is not to say that we don't face a daunting challenge in the next few months as we figure out what to do about this. But it does underscore the point, which I think you were getting at a minute ago, which is to say that you can't simply present this to the Congress as a must-have. There are other alternatives, including and especially agreement that we need a balanced budget amendment in place before we raise the debt limit again. We've got to put some structural permanent change in place to the way Washington spends money before we allow Washington to take on a new credit card.
Senator, let's assume that everybody were so rational as to pass your legislation. And what would be the effect? When would the balanced budget be required? How much time would you all have? Because you have frittered away, and I say you all, I of course exclude you. But the fact is the Senate and the Congress and the President of the United States over the course of decades has brought us to this point. Both political parties, all parts of government. It's a disastrous situation. Why in the world do you think a balanced budget amendment would not simply be ignored?
Well, first of all, when something becomes part of the Constitution, Congress can't ignore it. It wouldn't ignore it. There would be enormous political consequences and likely legal consequences as well if it tried to. To answer the first part of your question, this particular proposal, the one backed by all 47 Republicans in the United States Senate, contains a 5-year delayed implementation clause. It would take effect 5 years after it had been ratified by the states. That would give Congress enough time to reach that comfortable glide path toward balancing its budget.
So why would not reasonable men and women right now understand that it is time to bring to bear their judgment, their wisdom, their prudence, their sense of responsibility, instead of being forced by a constitutional amendment? It would seem to me that that would be entirely practicable without benefit of a balanced budget amendment.
Yes, this is an argument that's raised frequently, and I understand the argument. I'm sympathetic to it in many respects. But at the end of the day, Lou, we have to remember that every time in the past when Congress has adopted statutory spending limits, those remain intact and respected in the short term, but in the long term, within 5 years, Congress starts to ignore them. Congress will eventually repeal its way out of those
Senator,
limits.
how long does it take?
Usually within about 5 years, Congress starts to weasel its way out of it.
Well, we watched in the 2011 budget, two parties claim that they had reached agreement to cut $30 billion from that budget, and it turned out to be a matter of a few hundred million. I mean, this is a Congress, a Senate, and a White House that frankly isn't overwhelmed with its burden of being factual and straightforward with the American people when it comes to fiscal policy, is it?
That's right, that's right. And that's one of the reasons why I voted against that concurrent resolution that claimed to implement $38 billion in cuts, but really didn't even scratch the surface of that.
Right.
But look, the point is, if all we can get are statutory spending caps, which we do need, they are necessary, I applaud them and I encourage them, but if that's all we have, that's not enough, because Congress controls the law. It can wave its way out of the law, and in the past, Congress has served as its sort of own walking, living, breathing waiver. And so we've got to put it into the text of the Constitution so that Congress can't exempt its way out of it when times get tough.
Well, assuming that then you did that, I have to tell you, my first reaction is, knowing the conduct of this Senate, this House, and this President, and I'm talking about for decades here, the folks that we've been sending to Washington, D.C., their idea of a balanced budget would be to raise taxes rather than reduce spending.
Yes, and Senate Joint Resolution 10, the one that I and all 47 Republicans in the Senate and a number of people in the House as well are backing, says that in order to raise taxes, it would require a two-thirds supermajority vote in both houses of Congress. So it would be possible, but very difficult and extraordinary. to raise taxes.
Senator, always good to talk with you. Thanks for being here. Senator Mike
Thank
Lee.
you.